Thank you, Dhanush, so much for setting the context and setting this up. Good morning, everyone. Super excited to have you all. Thank you for joining this Monday morning. Right, we're very excited to host, episode 7 of Specialetalks. This is a series of conversations that we have with SaaS founders, early stage SaaS founders and practitioners, right, to learn about everything that is going on in the SaaS world. And we're in the thick of things, and today's conversation is about product-led growth and how that is impacting the SaaS world and how that is becoming one of the primary ways of GTM strategies for a lot of SaaS companies to acquire customers and to scale up. Right, so it's a very exciting topic, very current. Right, I think it has accelerated over the last couple of years, also even more so than ever before. Right, so we're very excited to talk about that. Right, just to give a quick background about Special Invest, we're an early stage seed fund investing in pre-seed seed ideas in what we call deep tech and enterprise software SaaS companies. We work with founders, helping them find product market fit, early set of customers, and validating their hypothesis, and any other help that is required in the first 2 to 3 years of the company building, right? And that's who we are, and based out of Bangalore and Chennai. And super excited today to host two amazing people on this panel who have lived through the SaaS journeys, and particularly PLG journeys, and are building it even today. They're experts in their own rights in this world. Karishma Rajaratnam, who's currently growth marketing at Vidyard, spent a bunch of years at ChargeBee building growth, doing growth and marketing. Right, she's also a PLG mentor and a coach, right, and therefore is a lot more immersed into this ecosystem than anybody else. So super excited to welcome Karishma and have her on board and listen to her experiences. Hey, welcome, Karishma.
Thanks, Arjun. Thanks so much. Excited.
Also super excited to have Sudarshan Karthik, as is popularly known, co-founder of Revenue Hero. Right, he spent a fair few years at Freshworks, right, on the product side of things, and is now building Revenue Hero to enable PLG companies drive more sales by better conversions, and that's an amazing platform, right? We've had a fair few exciting conversations with Sudha over the last couple of years. So again, super excited to have you today as well and learn from your experiences, right? Thank you, Sudha, for being here.
Thanks for having me, Arjun, and it's great to have Karishma here as well. She's been the person who's been talking about PLG a lot. In fact, some of the reasons that we picked up PLG was Karishma had a fantastic slide on PLG sometime that says PLG not equal to no sales, right? And that's the piece that we keep using whenever we do sales pitches. So
that seems like the nice crossover for you for what you're doing at Revenue Hero.
Yeah. So I'm really happy to share this stage with her and with the folks at Speciale as well, right? So some of the warmest and kindest people I've met. So happy to do this. Yeah.
Very kind. Thank you so much. So maybe we'll start off with just quick introductions from both of you, a little bit about past background, what you worked on and what you're working on currently, as well as your own personal connection to PLG, right? Just setting some context. That'll be very valuable. Karishma, if you can go first.
Awesome. Sure. Thanks. First off, thanks, Susa and Arjun. Those were super kind introductions. Like Arjun mentioned, I'm currently leading growth marketing at Vidyard, and we specifically focus on, or my team specifically focuses on acquisition, retention, and monetization of our free user base. And the ultimate goal is to be able to convert more free users into paying customers, but by providing them product value along their journey of using the Vidyard product. Vidyard is basically a video creation tool. It allows you to easily record and send videos to your prospects and customers and colleagues. And so, we have a free plan that attracts a wide base of users. And so my team's goal is really figuring out how to show these users value as soon as possible in their onboarding journey, and then ultimately show them enough value that they would want to convert to a paying plan. So I've been in PLG SaaS for about 8 years now. Prior to Vidyard, I spent close to 5 years at ChargeBee, where my role initially started off on the digital marketing side of things, so building the SEM, SEO play at ChargeBee. But then eventually, as ChargeBee started moving up market, we needed focus on our freemium version of the product. And that's where my focus shifted. So I really started to focus on building out the freemium plan and then building the product-led growth motion and working with our sales and product team to do so. So both the ChargePay and Vidyard experiences were kind of closely related to PLG. So I learned some things along the way and super happy to share in this session. And super excited to chat with Susa. We both have been talking about PLG for a while, so I think this conversation will be exciting.
Awesome. No, that's amazing context. Sometimes I wonder if PLG was around 8 years ago. That means you've been around as long as it's been around. So that's perfect, right? Susa, over to you. Your background and how you got here, and PLG as well.
So my name is Susa, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Revenue Hero. So we help PLG companies, put the sales assist motion for freemium and free trial companies, and help sales teams in those companies close deals faster. Right. My experience actually comes from there, and I did 7 years at Freshworks, 3 years in sales, and 4 years in product. And one of the reasons I realized I was successful as a salesperson in Freshworks was because of PLG. What I mean by that is, like, if you look at the earlier sales, right, it was a lot of wheeling and dealing, right? It is Chuck, the enterprise sales guy, blue suit, big suitcase, right? Used to close deals in dinners and etc. And it is more about relationship than value, right? And value is delivered after the sale. But if you think about a company like Freshworks, I was a complete fresher who did not know anything about sales, and probably one of those places where not knowing things helps you be successful, was that Freshdesk was a company where anybody could sign up for a trial and start using the product, right? There, the entire sales cycle, whatever, we could only get money out of people if people found value in the product, right? There's no reason that they would pay because they like Susa, or they had an enterprise contact with Freshworks to buy, $1 million of software from us, like Oracle, right? So that was my entry and segue into PLG, and we realized that the barriers in PLG is completely broken, right? There's no product, market, sales barriers anymore. Everybody is just focused on generating value for the user, right? It's and every outcome in a PLG company is from that, right? If you don't add value, if there is a department that doesn't focus on adding value to the end user and the people buying the software, right, you are not going to have a very successful PLG motion, right? So that's what I learned from the 7 years at Freshworks, and we've realized that some things need to be done differently for salespeople and PLG motions, Arjun, and that's what we are building towards. Right?
Awesome. No, I think super pertinent problem that you guys are solving, and very exciting to see how you guys grow and build this out. I actually want to start with from diving into this topic is first defining PLG. While there is just so much talk around it, sometimes I also worry that the lines are blurred and everybody sometimes ends up wanting to use the buzzword and claiming that they're a PLG company, right? So in your opinion, and I know it can differ from person to person and context to context, but would love to get both your opinions on what you define PLG to be at the core, correct? And where, therefore, should a company think about, okay, this is what makes us a PLG company, or this doesn't make us a PLG company, right? A little bit on that would be very valuable. Karishma?
Sure. So I think, in my opinion, product-led growth is when a customer is able to see the value of your product with very little to no intervention from a human being, right? The customer should be able to sign up for your product, try and test it, and really get to that aha moment of, hey, this product has just clicked for me, without necessarily having to have a salesperson handhold them through that process, or even a customer success person, or anyone really handholding them through that process. So for a company that wants to become a product-led growth company, I think the first question is to ask yourself is like, does my product experience today, is it built in such a way that the customer is able to sign up and see that value instantly? And if not, how do I get it to become that, or how do I get it to get there? And having said that, I don't think that there is no role for sales in a PLG company. I think sales is absolutely critical to a PLG company. It's just that I think the difference is that you want to provide that onboarding experience to the customer without the salesperson, and bring the salesperson in at the time when the customer has seen that initial value, right? Because that's the stage at which they want to talk to someone. Now, if someone signs up for the product and we're pitching them a paid version straight up before they even saw any kind of value with it, that's a heavily sales-led kind of approach. It's not really product-led. But if we're able to get them to that point of seeing value and then insert a sales touch, you've then shown them that value, and the conversion becomes a lot more natural, and it almost like helps the salesperson even build a better relationship. So I think a great PLG company understands when to bring the salesperson in, and they have a product experience that really lets the customer experience that value, and sort of finds a balance between these two things of sales and product, and makes it blend very well.
Got it. No, I think that's very nicely and crisply defined. Thank you for that. Susa, your thoughts, your way of looking at PLG, anything different, anything you want to add to this?
I think it's just like car sales, right? Like one of the things I also keep telling people is PLG is an and, not an or, right? Like it's not like product-led growth companies don't do outbound. It's not like product-led growth companies don't do, expansion motion selling, right? So product-led growth is a funnel today that every company needs to explore, right? Because if your company if there is a possibility for somebody to make a simpler, easier version of your product and allow an end user to experience it, some smart person is going to go do it out there, right? So in some sense, this is just a continuation of continuing to disrupt yourself. I feel like product-led growth is an easier umbrella to bring that disruption into your company rather than go tell in a large meeting saying, our product is unusable, people are going to competitors because it's easy to use, right? Always a hard conversation to have. I think it's being able to build that funnel where people are able to, like Karishma said, use the product, make it as valuable in the first 30 minutes as possible for somebody, and make it awesome, right? And this is what has been happening in B2C sales, if you think about it, right? If I go to a car showroom, salesperson doesn't come and say what car you're looking at and like bother you around, right? You go look around the car showroom, look at what car you like, test drive it, and the salesperson just looks at you, judges you for how much you can buy and what cars you looked at, and just tries to assist you in making a decision, right? And that's how you look at it. Also, the funnels are growing, right? Like Karishma will definitely tell you how much like training content is super important, how much digital marketing is important, how much customer education becomes important in a PLG funnel, right? Like, and the other three things that have happened is remote work disables the whole wining and dining motion in enterprise sales, right? It's very hard to now justify me flying to the US or like flying cities to close a deal of 20K when you're now used to doing that remote, right? Number one. Number two, I think gatekeepers of any sort are going to be removed in SaaS, right? Old company salesperson was a gatekeeper. The discovery process itself in SaaS is very broken. I'll fill up a form, somebody will call me and ask me saying, are you looking for software? I'm like, why else would I have filled the form? And there is a college graduate SDR goes through the discovery and then gives me access to the product. While competition is so big, right? Any company that you look at, there is like 10 other alternatives. The alternative that just gets out of the way is going to win, right, Arjun? So I think it's reduction in friction, removal of gatekeepers, right? And everybody rallying around product to grow, retain, and acquire users, right? So wherever marketing is not able to fill in, sales can come in, and maybe there is a way to automate some of the sales approaches back into marketing, right? So it's this continuous flow that keeps happening.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I'd also want to add that I think the persona of the buyer has completely changed in like the PLG era, where now you have end users who are now like also decision makers or influencers in the buying process, right? Like, so if we look at a typical, let's say I'm selling like a marketing automation tool in a sales-led company, I would go straight to the VP of marketing because I know they will have the budget and they will have the signing power to be able to actually sign that contract and close that deal, right? I might altogether ignore like the end users of the actual product and go straight to the decision maker and build a relationship there. But in today's like era, I think buyers within B2B companies, like, so within a marketing team, your content marketer, your digital marketer, they all have equal power, if not more power in that decision-making process, because if they don't use the product, it's going to be unlikely that that product will provide the company value, right? So there's a shift, I think, also in the way sales teams need to approach selling in a PLG world, where today selling is about driving user level adoption, driving customer delight, and then ultimately then going up to the decision maker to make that deal, right? So you're dealing with a lot more people today in an organization than just the VP level and the CEO level. You're also having to deal with the user of your product. And that's where the whole self-serve experience becomes critical, because end users don't want to have to keep calling a salesperson or a CX rep to try to get to use the product. They need to be able to seamlessly use it and then go to their manager and say, hey, I love this product. It's helping me do my job better. It's saving me this much time. Can I please make budget for it, right? And that's how that sales cycle is kind of evolved. And so I think there's also a shift in the way sales teams now have to sell. And I'm sure Susa has a ton to share, just given the product they're building helps salespeople do this.
Yeah, I think Karishma is 100% correct, right? Like with the whole great resignation also happening and people not spending more than 2 to 3 years at a company, right? Selling to VP is actually now, just selling to the VP is a recipe for disaster, because what happens is the next new VP comes in, you have to sell and build that end up like whole relationship over again, right? While you have to continuously doing that, knowing the end users is the better place anywhere for a SaaS company to make sure that a company keeps using it, right? Because there is no way a manager in this era can come in and say, we use Salesforce in my old company, so all you 10 sales reps, irrespective of whether you like it or not, you have to go use it, right? It's actually not going to happen. Even at Freshworks, for example, all the internal products that we built to replace things that we built Fresh Marketer and we had to replace Autopilot, right? For Fresh Marketer to convince people from Autopilot took 6 months internally, right? And even with like internal mandates saying, hey, we are building this, you have to use this. So it's just very hard to go in and come from that VP level decision making anymore, right? It's all bottoms up. And at this point of time, most people live in software, right? And if you choose bad software, you're like bringing morale down or etc., right? Like any sales rep who uses Salesforce is very tired at the end of the day and goes and ends up buying a Scratchpad or Dooley separately from their payroll, right? And says, I'm willing to spend $40 to make this software usable. Somebody is spending $30 on Gmail to buy Superhuman to make it usable, right? So if you don't make decisions, people love the company, people just decide to buy other tools and make it useful, right? And at Freshworks, we used to have SaaS waste, around to the tune of 40%, right? People will buy products and not use it. And what happens is that at some point of time, when cost-cutting time comes in March, when we are reviewing budgets, you go and look at like, hey, we bought so many things, we didn't use it at all. And that is because the sales rep mindset in the old age was to say, hey, swipe my credit card, I'm done, etc., right? But if you look at PLG sales companies, even if somebody buys the credit card and has no usage, right? Like they will go and say, do you want a free session, right? They will invite people to webinars to get value out of it, right? So I think right now, everything is a race to end user value, right? And it's not just the sales departments, for example, right? Even the way you do your billing and refund policy, right? Like earlier, it used to be, if you buy a product for 1 year and if you cancel in the middle, you get nothing, right? Those things are not going to fight. Customer unfriendly, right? Like you'll only charge for whatever. Now customers have 30-day refund policy in SaaS. So if you buy something and cancel within 30 days, you can go ahead and cancel within, right? So every aspect of a company is now turning to lesser friction and lesser gatekeeping, right? And that's why we believe PLG is great. PLG is not just a free trial or a freemium, in my opinion, right? It's just a concerted effort to reduce friction everywhere in the funnel for an end user.
No, I think 2 key points I picked up from both of you. Of course, I love the car salesman analogy, right? And how that happens, right? So I'll remember that one. But particularly the move from user having sort of the power, right, and the decision-making capabilities within organizations is becoming more and more, pretty much across all functions, right? There might be a handful of functions where the decision makers who are, let's say, seniors up top of the VP or whatever else might still be holding on, but those are largely remnants of the past. And therefore, right, for anybody building any software product, start thinking about the user first, right, and their satisfaction and their buy-in, if we may call it that. And then, there's a better chance of penetrating the organization, if we may say so. right? I do want to double click on, while it seems like this move is irreversible and all software and all functions almost will have this sort of a flavor, we still sometimes get the feeling, and maybe it's early days, get the feeling that there are certain types of products, right? And Susa, you mentioned a couple. You mentioned Superhuman. We, for example, within our organization, use a fair bit of Notion, right? These come obviously to our mind when we maybe think consumerish products slash PLG products, right? They are much more tuned towards this approach as opposed to, let's say, a heavy duty CRM product for an entire organization. So on that spectrum, is there a way to sort of define that spectrum for where is it better fit versus where there is a little more? And you all, I think, Karishma, you mentioned it is not no sales, there is that mix of sales, right? On that spectrum, right, where do you say it is more product, less sales, from a combination perspective? What type of companies, can we define that a little bit?
Sure, I can take a stab at this. I think this is largely dependent on the type of customer the company serves more than the vertical or like the type of product in itself. So, for example, if you take ChargeBee as an example, like we had a freemium plan, but as we were moving up market, we started to realize that enterprise buyers want to talk to someone, right? In an enterprise org, because there are so many different stakeholders and decision makers, a salesperson's role is to really be that like relationship builder that ties all the people in that org together to really help them make the sale. And enterprise buyers, some of them may be used to buying in an old school way, right? They may not be used to just signing up for a product and necessarily using it, though that completely depends on the type of buyer. Even within enterprise companies, of course, you have those who prefer like a PLG cycle, but there may be a type of profile of enterprise buyer that would want to just call up someone and talk to them, right? So I think as you move up market, you'll find that layering on a sales team is really important and critical, because even if the enterprise buyer wants an end user experience, it's often a salesperson's role there is to often bring all the people in that org together and make the sale happen. Because otherwise, in an enterprise company, it can take a very long time for them to make a decision on the product, because there are too many different stakeholders, and unless we're pushing on our side to make that sale happen, it's likely to just be left hanging and the deal will take really long to close if left to a completely self-serve experience. So I think the moment you start to move up market or start thinking about selling larger deal numbers, I think that is when you really need to think about like, how can I layer a sales team on top of a free trial experience or a freemium experience if need be. And I think like even the B2C like products will see, I think, as they're moving up market, that they need that solid sales team. For example, even a Notion, if they were selling to like an Adobe, for example, I'm pretty sure that to make that deal happen, you would need a pretty solid sales team and have sales reps who know exactly what they're doing and know who to approach within the organization. When you're selling enterprise, there are legal teams to think about. There are like there's several different protocols that you really need to think about to make that deal close, and that's where a fully productized experience can take you to a certain extent, but it can't necessarily help close that full deal. So I think it really depends on the type of buyer. Now, if you're servicing only SMBs and early stage startups, I think you'll find that a fully self-serve experience actually works very well, because that's how these companies are used to buying. It's easy if you're selling to a 10-member company for the founder of that company to take out their credit card and swipe it. But when that sale happens to like a 100-member company, then there's approval processes, there's legal processes and things like that, which is where a self-serve experience just won't cut it, and you need an experienced sales team to come in and really help tie things together. So I think more than the vertical and type of product, it is also who you're selling to and the customer and what they need given their profile.
Got
it. Interesting. Susa, any thoughts on that? Maybe
it's a question I have to
one question to that. Sorry.
It's a question I have to deeply think about every day, because it determines my TAM. Right? Earlier, like Karishma used to think, I used to said my first assumption was that some verticals were sort of not touchable, right? Like a good example I thought was finance, right? Then I read the Expensify S1 and then realized that most end users install the Expensify app to file expenses, and then the finance team goes ahead and buys it, right? So if you look at any company today, there is a end user experience and there is an admin experience, right? Now, even for some people like HRMS tools, right? Like, once somebody experiences an awesome end user experience from a HRMS tool, no way are they going to allow their company to buy something like a Workday or a Oracle HRMS anymore, right? So even if you are a sales-led motion, right? Let's say you're a Darren Box selling HRMS tools to a 500-member company, right? If you don't innovate on experience, your next sale is going to happen based on referral, right? Like, I'll give you a good example, right? A lot of Freshservice customers used to keep referring others because they just love the simplicity of the software and end users being able to log in and do a lot of things automatically, right? So I think even for sales-led companies, they still need to focus on end user experiences again and again. There was this awesome offer letter tool that I think roamed around the internet where somebody put amazing offer letter where you could say what was my bull case for ESOPs, bear case for ESOPs, right? Now, for an end user, that's now going to become the best offer letter that they could see, right? So my feeling is that still some verticals are unsuitable, like HRMS is still going to be a VP HR decision, etc., right? But then you take LMS, right? LMS used to be something that was bought top down by HR and roll out L&D programs, right? But now Karishma, for example, thinks about every day about how to do learning and development for her team, right? A support manager thinks about how to do learning and development for her team, right? So LMS now becomes a department level purchase, right? So the other thing that's now breaking, if you think about it, is that large purchases across company itself is now breaking, right? Even now leaders are looking at, hey, which team is doing this well? Let's take this best practice across the company, right? That's how purchases used to happen at Freshworks itself, right? Like, is this small team using Slack really well? And they are shipping more as an engineering team rather than this team using GChat. Let's just put Slack over, right? So I still think regulatory concerns will play. You can't sell to a bank with PLG, right? Because they can't even sign up for your tool because you just send an alert to their admin to say, hey, you've signed up for something that does not do SOC 2 or ISO or PCI, right? So I think the regulatory concerns will be preventive for like the ultra enterprises of some sorts, but I think every company should be end user driven. I'll give you the best example, right? Like there is WhatFix and WhatMe. They are essentially tools to help you use software better, right? There is no reason for that kind of a product to be enterprise sales driven, right? Karishma or Susa should be just able to log in and say, this is the process to be followed for this software and give it, right? I don't need to talk to enterprise sales and do this, right? So today there are competitors like Tango coming up, which is a end user focused WhatFix, right? Now, who knows what's going to happen, but that's a fantastic battle to play up, right? And also I think software today is unnecessarily expensive, right? That's my, even as a founder, that's my, this thing. Technology is supposed to be deflationary in nature, right? But if you look at SaaS companies, prices have increased 10 times in the last 10 years, right? But innovation is supposed to bring price down. And I actually think it's because what companies do is when they go up market, hire a 150K sales rep to justify the salary, have to increase software rates and etc., right? Feel like PLG is going to be a nice way to offset that, where you have more user assist people, not your 200K, 250K purebred enterprise sales reps anymore, who are going to help, bring down the cost of software, because your S&M cost is so much and it's crazy, right?
Like, let me just pick up on that one aspect, Susa, and question for both of you from there. Is there some ACV tip-off point where PLG is very hard to pull off after that range of ACV in your minds, in your experiences, what you have seen, right? How do you define some numbers, just for metrics for some of the people that are listening today?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned ACV because I was just going to bring that up, because I think like where PLG really needs, or like where that product like growth motion needs that sales push, is when the ACV starts to get higher and higher. So for example, at ChargeBee, we used to see that, at a $3,000 type ACV, like PLG was a pretty sweet spot in the sense, like, to get a $3,000 deal off the ground, you could do it largely self-serve. But at least at the time when I was there, post that number, things would get complicated because it's a billing system. And when you think about billing, again, talking about verticals and industries, it is something that it's a core critical piece of infrastructure for your software company. And so you can't just sort of buy that and make a switch 12 months in, right? It's all of your software's finances that is being controlled by a product like that. And so it's really critical then post like a 3K ACV that somebody, a decision maker in the company comes in, either a finance person or a lead developer comes in to like really take that decision on, what the contract is going to look like and whether a purchase decision will be made. At Vidyard as well, like we have a pro plan that we sell for like $15 a month. It's a super cheap plan, but the idea is to get the end user in, get them to commit a certain amount, and see if they drive value within that like pro feature set. And then from there on, we have like an account-based strategy where we bring all these end users together and try to upsell our paid plan. And again, like our paid version start at about 3K ACV and then go upwards. We can go up to like 100K plus ACV. And again, we start to see that post that 3K is when like you need again a salesperson to come in and kind of really help. I think this could really wildly differ from company to company. Like some companies may see that it's looking much higher, like beyond 10K is where it gets like a little hard. But I definitely think that as the deal value gets bigger, it's harder for end users to get approvals to make large payments, right? Like if let's say I'm in a team of 10 marketers and 5 of us are using a tool that we really love, it's going to be hard for us to just pick up a credit card and swipe that for like a 50K deal. And that's when you really like, I would want to, let's say I'm at Vidyard and I want to buy that product. I'll want to talk to a salesperson just to make sure that like, this is the right decision that we're going ahead with, that the product is going to be able to solve for our future needs, because that's something that a product can't tell you, right? Like the product can only show you what it is today. But is this product going to scale with my needs becomes a big question that scaling companies have, because today I might be dealing with, say, like 10,000 leads a month and I need this product to solve for that 10,000. But if I'm projecting an increase to 30,000 leads per month in 6 months, I want to know that that product can scale with that. And that's something, that kind of commitment, assurance, and trust can only be built with a salesperson. And that's where I think, salespeople have to come in as the deal size gets bigger.
I think to add to what Karishma said, it's potential ACV also, right? Like if a company like ChargeBees, let's say, signs up for a product, you want to put a salesperson from day one, because on the account to say, I'm here to help, because you know that this company has a potential wallet spend of more than your average SMB, right? So you will still let them on the end user journey, but you still have somebody there so that you can expand the account quite faster.
I think that makes sense, right? How do you say, okay, this could potentially, like you said, become a 10K account, and therefore there's some level of handholding and relationship building help, right? And maybe it doesn't happen obviously in 3 months, but it could happen in 12 months, right? Or even longer. But how do you do that once the early adoption is done?
And it's all because of the markets, right? Because if you think about 3 years back, if I went and said the word NRR in a room, right? Yeah. Every Indian would think net run rate or something like that. Or I don't know whether there's a Western sports analogy to it, right? But as soon as people realize that net run rate, like the next expansion rate or net retention rate becomes super important, right? Like if you have a net retention rate of 15% and I'm a company doing $50 million, I can just assume that, let's keep it at 20, I'm bad at math, $10 million in revenue is just going to come from my existing customers without an additional sales and marketing spend, right? With the current workforce, etc. So everybody has to look at expansion and retention, because AdWords is going up every day, right? Like competition is expensive, ads are expensive, and there's ad blindness as well, right? Like there's just too many ads, etc. So I think that's the other reason that PLG is going up, right? It's just a cheaper way to acquire and retain and expand users.
Maybe we double click particularly on that. If we want to break down the 3 parts, and I think both of you referred to it, and particularly talking about saying there's acquisition first, which is of course, for an early stage company, that is the first problem to tackle, right? Because you want to build a base of, customers that are liking you and loving you, right? And then there is retention and then growth, right? Or I don't know if that is the right order, but if you can just double click on that to say, where should the PLG action emphasize, focus on, right? It seems there's a little more acquisition focus, right, than maybe retention focus. And I'm hearing that for the retention part, people need to come into the ecosystem. It could be customer success, support, sales, different roles and different personalities at some point. But acquisition seems to be the area where PLG has maximum impact. Am I getting that right? Anyone's thoughts on that? Would love to hear.
So I would actually argue that PLG's goal should be on the acquisition and retention side of things. Monetization is where your sales team really comes in. And again, that is heavily dependent on the ACV value, like I said. And the reason I say retention is critical is because I think a lot of product-led growth companies focus a lot on the acquisition side of things, where a lot of companies believe that PLG is about launching a freemium plan and then the rest is just magic. But what often happens is that there's a leaky bucket in most cases, because PLG, when you launch freemium or free trial, you tend to attract a ton of users naturally at the top of the funnel, but not all of these users will be the best users of your product, right? So there's a level of prioritization that has to happen in terms of which users you want to focus on. But because the top of the funnel is increasing so much, you often find that it tends to break down where not a lot of these users come back and actively use the product. Now, for monetization to smoothly happen and for it to actually happen, you need those engaged end users, because if your end users that you're acquiring at the top of the funnel aren't using, then the sell, or like the bottoms up sell, is going to be much harder. So I think at both companies that I've been at, I've seen that, the middle of the funnel often tends to suffer as a result of like us making changes to freemium, or like offering more free versions of our product, or like a wider limit on freemium. And that's just because freemium tends to attract a lot of people top of the funnel, but then getting them to use the product and see value is always naturally a harder challenge. So I think a lot of companies don't necessarily focus on retention, but it should be a focus, because to drive sufficient monetization or to make your freemium plan ROI positive, you need to have a steady base of those freemium users, or like free trial users actively using the product, so that when the salesperson comes in, it's a pretty natural sell for them when they see, like, out of a company of say 50 people, if 20 people are active users, it becomes very easy for the salesperson, or easier for the salesperson, to go straight to the VP and say, hey, 20 people are using the product in the organization. It makes total sense for you to upgrade to a paid version, right? So regardless of how that touch happens of monetization, whether it's through a sales touch or whether it's fully self-serve, I think the goal of the product should be that it provides value on its own without needing the assistance of the sales team, so that when the sales team steps in, it's like a natural sell, and things are a lot easier at that stage.
No, I think very important takeaway. I think the focus on retention, right? Because the leaky bucket is a very big problem, right? You keep otherwise pumping the top of the funnel and having as much inflow as possible, but you're losing a lot, and therefore your dollars are pretty much going there. And it's not direct dollars now, but it is time and effort of the product team and the growth team that is working on it, right? And that is going waste. So headline there is to focus on acquisition, but also very specifically on retention.
I think sales team is also more like a consulting kind of outfit, right? Like, see, because Vidyard is a very horizontal product. Now, there is a salesperson who's probably not used to video for the first time, right? Now, there are different ways you can do that, right? One is Vidyard definitely has how to do video sales. There'll be a course, then there'll be a community of users. There'll be webinars where you can learn, or sometimes you might just reach out to a salesperson on Vidyard saying, hey, I'm trying to do this campaign. Have you seen other people do this differently with the product, right? So it's not, most of the times people reach out to sales people is for all the expert use cases or best practices, or how do I get more out of what I'm putting money into your product, right? So I 100% agree with Karishma on retention, because there is a very critical role for product as you go up market, right? Like, you start up with a product like Vidyard or Freshdesk, small teams will begin to use it. Now, most product teams will start optimizing for the end user, right? There'll be so many end user features. Now you'll notice that, hey, I'm retaining all the 5-member teams. I'm not able to retain all the 15-member teams. And you will go double click and you'll realize that you don't have enough reporting, enough permissions, roles, controls, etc., right? So retention is something that a company needs to completely look at, because win rates averages are a pretty much useless metric all around the world, right? Especially in SaaS. Now, let's say Karishma is looking at a funnel. She'll definitely look at how many big company sales things I'm doing. Because even if I'm an end user, if I see there is no reporting capability in the product, I may not sign up because I might be like, my boss is not going to like this.
Right.
Like, yeah. So all these.
Yeah, I think that's a super important point. I also think that when we think retention in SaaS companies, we often tend to think of the customer success team as owning retention, which in many cases, of course, customer success does own retention. But oftentimes, like at least in the way I've noticed SaaS companies have been built is that customer success primarily focus on paid users, right? Because it doesn't necessarily make sense to have a one-on-one relationship with free users at the scale at which free users are acquired, which is where I think it's the role of the marketing team to come in, like Susa mentioned, like building webinars, collateral, like content that will help the free users see the value in the product and provide the right kind of content for them to be able to successfully use the product. And that's where product and marketing have to be super tightly aligned, because it's not just enough, I think, in my opinion, to give the user a great product and just leave it at that. I think there has to be some kind of education, product education that happens. And that's where growth marketing, product marketing, and the product team all really like try to collaborate on that onboarding experience to make sure the customer has assets that they need to not need to talk to a salesperson. Like if I'm able to join a weekly training session, let's say I'm a new user of Vidyard and I'm able to just hop on a weekly webinar that walks me through all the different use cases with video, that's probably sufficient for me as an end user alongside a great product experience. I don't necessarily need to talk to a salesperson until I'm ready to buy. So I think crafting that experience where the initial product onboarding is smooth and it's backed by great marketing collateral and making sure that your marketing team has somebody who's owning retention, I think is really important, because I think marketing teams at SaaS companies tend to heavily lean on the side of acquisition. There's no one necessarily thinking about retention as much besides maybe product marketing. And so that focus shift also has to happen, I think, with PLG.
Very interesting.
Also, like we tend to use our products more than everybody else, and we think it's super easy, right? One of the things is like when you sell Freshdesk, there are new agents that onboard every day, right? Now think about their experience, right? Their manager will be like, yeah, this is easy to use, go use it, right? Now for them, they can't come out to support.freshdesk.com and read all the articles, right? Now there needs to be a place where somebody who's the 11th agent in a company that uses Freshdesk needs to be able to go and learn all the basics, right? Now, how do you structure that content? How do you make the 11th agent in a Freshdesk company, person using Freshdesk happy? How do you make that 11th person onboarded onto this thing, right? Simple things like when you send a user added email, don't just say, here's the link for you to log in, right? Give a link to community, give a link to how to be successful in the next 10 days, and link to your webinar, right? Like really, both of these things have to play hand in hand, right? Otherwise, also, the most important thing that I'm sure Karishma did at Chartvi is also give product feedback back, right? Like when you become a large company, product managers are super removed from end users, right? We are prioritizing bug fixes and everything. Marketing, and when you send the marketing campaigns, you'll definitely receive an email that says, I've been asking for this for the last 2 months. It's not fixed. The new person in my team is not able to do this, etc., right? So marketing being the voice of the existing customers is more important than being the voice of the new customer, in my opinion.
No, right? That's a very interesting point that you make there. And I was reminded that I think the Superhuman founder once mentioned that they have a superset list of all asks made by any customer ever, right? And whenever they get to fixing one of those or adding that feature that maybe somebody may have asked even a year ago or 2 years ago, they send that individual user an email, right, saying your feature is now live or some such thing. And you can only imagine how much of a amazing customer feeling that must be at that point in time, and that is helping retention at the end of the day, right? Because it shows that this organization cares, this team cares about me and whatever I've said. Maybe I said it a year ago, right? So that was very interesting that you mentioned that you have to have an ear to the customer even at much later points in time, even at certain scale, right? I wanted to touch upon a couple of things, and we spoke about this, but I wanted, if possible, are there numbers and benchmark numbers that particularly earlier stage organizations, earlier and growth stage organizations can aspire towards? Let's say paid customers to, free customers, free trial users to paid customer conversion rates. All right. What are these numbers? What should these numbers look like? I know there is some subjectivity there in terms of what is the price of the product, etc. But are there some benchmarks that, let's say, somebody starting to build a PLG motion product early stage should keep in mind to aspire towards and build towards? Any thoughts?
I don't know if I'm getting this right. Can't be 100% sure, but I think there have been some benchmarks that have been published in the past where, Slack obviously is a PLG company that's like a guru in the space because they really help define like this whole PLG movement. And I think the free to paid conversion rates that they were seeing in the heyday was like close to 30%, which was benchmarked as like really great conversion rates. Of their free users to paying customers. But I believe that the average rests at around 10% in B2B SaaS, which is considered to be like a pretty decent rate. So I think anywhere between 10 to 15% is like a good thing to aim for. And then of course, if you're above that 15%, I think that's really good. Like 20% and above would be considered a pretty solid free to paid conversion rate. But again, like this is super subjective depending on like
that some ranges are very, very, again, because from a clean slate to some numbers are valuable. I'm just thinking, if I'm wrong, this might have to tie in with your churn numbers as well, right? There has to be some correlation to what your monthly and therefore annual churn numbers could be. If you could also throw some light on, what should people aspire to, what is bad, too high churn numbers, what is reasonable, handleable churn numbers, thoughts on that?
I think one thing I'll just add to Karishma's earlier answer is, again, depends on stage. Like Karishma says, right? Like you're not going to get 10% from day one.
Sure.
For a really early stage company, what's more important is, am I getting at least one person to pay or two people to pay and
Sure.
three people to pay? You don't have volume problems at day one.
Correct.
Right? Are you able to solve the end user? Is the end user referring you to someone else, right? Staring at log rocket every day, full story every day, understanding what's broken and, doing what I call a mind the gap exercise, right? Like there's this HR exercise that everybody would have gone through where there's something called process description that happens where somebody says, how do you make a sandwich? And you write, how do I tear open a bread packet, right? And that person just tears it at the middle and the bread packet falls down and say, no, you have to say tear it open at the start, right? That's how most product builders also realize, like they think the use case is super simple, then go back and see the customer like didn't do this exactly like what they intended, right? In our short span at Revenue Hero itself, we've realized that we are so attuned to language, for example, right? Like a lot of the new people are not familiar with words like say activation or etc. Right? So how do you come up with language that makes it easy for people to onboard? Activation is a marketing term. Sales does not know what activation is, right? So how do you translate that from this to that, right? So early stage, that's very important.
Basically, newer and newer personas are becoming users of your product. So therefore, understand those personas. And like you said, language is one variable, other things and signals that they can pick up on what makes it easier for them to understand and therefore start using the product.
Correct, right? And churn-wise, I think SMB is 2 to 3%. Mid-market, if you're not growing from those companies, then you have to really think about what additional things can I do, right? So if you look at an average SaaS company at IPO, it has 10,000 customers, right? Now you can say 10,000 enterprise, 2,000 SMB, 5,000 mid-market, 2,000 enterprise, but you as a company have to decide what your comfortable spot is, right? Like earlier it used to mean that if you went enterprise, you have to abandon SMB, right? But I think companies like Vidyard, HubSpot, all of them are proving that that's again another false choice that's been thrown on us, right? Like it's not necessary that you have to abandon end users to go up market.
Yeah, it was almost interesting thought exercise to say the reason that the early successful companies in a category went up market and then they abandoned the SMB. Therefore, there was a space for somebody new to come in and capture SMB. Maybe Freshworks is a classic example of something like that, right? Historically, right? But what you're saying is that is changing as we go along.
It just ties back to that earlier point that I made that software is unnecessarily expensive, right? Because you have to pay enterprise sales rep salaries, enterprise customer success rep salaries, billing refund people's salaries, right? It's just crazy. Sorry, Karishma. Yeah, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to that to say, like, to your point of like, just because you're selling to the enterprise or moving up market doesn't necessarily mean you have to abandon the end user. At Vidyard, we're actually trying a interesting ABM strategy where even though we're targeting like commercial mid-market and enterprise companies, there is a focus on the end user where in order to be able to sell to these companies, we need the end user again to be actively using the product, because otherwise going to a VP of sales and saying, hey, buy this video product, it doesn't make sense, because the ultimate user of that product is going to be the end user, right? So if you're the VP sales and your team is not using that product, you're not going to want to sign like a 100K plus contract if nobody's really using it, right? So adoption actually becomes a really important problem, which is why sales and marketing really collaborate on this ABM strategy, where let's say sales has an account that they really want to prospect or target. Marketing's role is to make sure that there are enough users free users within that account that are using and getting value of the product. And then when we have enough users is where we PQL them, or we give them like a qualified lead tag to say that, okay, now this account is ripe for sales to work because it has 10 free users, for example. All of them are monthly active users. So now when the sales team reaches out to the VP of sales, it's going to be a much stronger sell for them, and it's going to be a much easier sell as well. So the role of marketing and product is to get more of those end users to use, be retained, and see the value. And then we collaborate with sales to say, hey, here's a ripe list of leads that you can work, right? And that's where this whole PQL concept sort of comes in, where you can.
And just for the audience, I'm just clarifying, product qualified lead is what PQL means, right? Of how many people have touched it, how many people have tried it, and therefore there is sort of critical mass, if you may call it that, in an organization to go after that organization to get the full account.
And like one other nuanced thing that comes out is like earlier sales reps' job was to create urgency in a sales process, right? Now urgency is created by marketing saying why you should send videos, why you should use video in sales process, right? Product makes it easier to say videos, right? Now there's a whole crossing the chasm curve in somebody being comfortable enough to make videos, right? So their community efforts, marketing efforts, everything in place. Maybe sales reps also teach you, right? The job of a sales rep in these deals is purely project management, if you think about it, where one project is getting all end users to like, who's the laggard end user, why, trying to talk to them and understand and get their difficulties off, right? Next is explain to the manager that everybody's using this and why you should invest, right? So now the good sales rep in my mind is somebody who knows the product, doesn't have to throw it to support to say, here's how you configure your use case, and does project management really well, saying, hey, 10 users are not using it, 10 users are using it. My first project in this company is to make these 10 people use it, right? And it's not even about hitting that MRR goal, right? You have to win hearts to win wallets. So that's how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to add to that, like qualities of a good salesperson or a great salesperson would be also being more data driven, because I think with PLG comes like a lot of data that people are working with. So, sales teams or salespeople that have access to data on how many people are using with the product, how engaged is this account actually, like how many MAUs does it have, how many, weekly active users does it have, really starting to go into the data and understand what's happening within the account, I think is critical for a salesperson. So it's no more a blind sell where you're just randomly reaching out to someone in the organization and hoping that it converts. But now it's really looking at the data on the organization that a product-led company has, because most product-led companies collect all of this data. So the best salespeople, I think, look for that data, or if it's not available within the company, they ask for that data, right? They want to see what usage is like, and they want to tailor their outreach and tailor their strategy based on the availability of that data.
I think
what I'm hearing is there is just a very lot more collaboration and tight-knit approach between product marketing and sales than there ever was. They were pretty much functioning in silos, if you may say so, half a decade or more ago, right? But that is a recipe for disaster. And unless they understand each other's motivations and use data from each other's actions, right, that's when they can do their job a lot better, is what is one theme that is coming across consistently.
I think everything is moving from website to product, right? Like if I want to run an upsell campaign, do you know the website is actually not too smart, right? So Zendesk did upsell campaigns for other products by using Google AdWords to target existing support desk customers. And when they clicked on it, it actually took them to the product, took them to the module and say try, right? So product is going to be the massive surface area on which everybody has to collaborate, right? And if you actually think about it, this goes back to what marketing was earlier. If you Google to physical products, right? They would actually go do the homework, come back and tell what needs to happen, etc. This product manager mini CEO wave, I think, is definitely done and over, right? Job of PM and all these companies just to curate the best ideas and make sure there are no blockers and get all these things done, right?
Yeah, I think if I look back 20-25 years, I think there was program manager and then there was marketing manager, right? But the product manager is sort of is an evolution that has happened over the last 20 years, but maybe there is a gap there.
And one example was like neobanks versus old banks, right? Like HDFC keeps calling me every day, irrespective of knowing that I don't want that credit card, right? But a NeoX or a Jupiter or whatever, all these neobank services in India, right? They don't call you unnecessarily. It's a push notification to go and say, I noticed that you use these things. These are the benefits. Do you want to talk to somebody about these benefits, right? Now, that's the being smart about outreach, right? And being cognizant of customer time and resources, right? Like I might be able to expand an account from 10 to 50 seats this quarter, but does the customer have the time? Is that too much change cycle for the customer, right? Am I going to alienate the first person who brought the product and make them feel like, I don't care about them anymore after I've gotten the other 15, 16 companies seats in that account, right? So there's a lot of nuances that play in. And I think, like Karishma said, product data, being able to tailor your outreach, not just emailing saying it's 7 days since the start of your trial. How can I help you, right? That email is either going into promotions or just going to be not noticed. So
on the email side, some of the things we're trying to do right now is like really base our emails off of product action. So for example, if someone signed up for Vidyard and has not created their first video, we want to send them a prompt to say like, hey, it's been a day since you've signed up and you haven't created a video yet. Here are some ideas on like what you can do for your very first video, right? Or if someone's created a video and hasn't shared it, we're trying to get we're trying to trigger an email that says, you've created a video, but you haven't shared it. To see the full value and the power of Vidyard, somebody needs to view your video. So go ahead and share it. So these kind of like triggered messaging prompts, I think is also the way in which like marketing teams are starting to think about things, so that we're not just blindly communicating to users, but we're actually communicating to them based on the actions they're taking inside of the product experience. So again, like data is very critical in this. It's not necessarily easy. And I think this is a massive opportunity actually for products out there to come and build something that solves this. But today it's not super easy to build this kind of triggered messaging system just off the bat, right? So I think there's actually a space that's going to develop here of like more PLG companies coming in to solve that. But I think a lot of marketing teams are starting to think about like, how do we get more fine-tuned with our messaging? And like Susa said, provide a sales touch at the right time when the user is ready to buy, when they've done something in the product that indicates that they're probably interested in buying.
Very important.
On this side, I think the CRM needs reinvention, right? Like if you look at the most important 2 data points for sales reps in a product-led company, it's product data and subscription data, right? And they end up being like 50 CRM fields in 200 CRM fields, where 100 I don't touch because it's some marketing automation thing that says employee size greater than this, then assign it to sales rep Arjun in mid-market CSM, right? Like companies we deal with, for example, they have their entire renewal info as custom fields inside a CRM, right? Now, every like what Karishma needs to is saying, it needs to flow to someone like support as well. If you think about it, right? Like look at a Vidyard support team, right? Tickets are coming in. Now you know that there is a customer who's not used the product in the last 2 weeks and has raised a support ticket. There is a customer who's used the product and just asked the how-to question. Which support ticket do you prioritize first, right? It has to be the customer who hasn't used it and raised a support ticket with you, right? Now, being operationally intelligent and allowing data to drive your everyday actions is super important, right? Not look at a dashboard 30 days later and here's what I should have done 30 days back, right? None of us are Dr. Strange. We can't go back in time. So data needs to drive everyday actions and not just be like a dashboard, right? And that's the other massive change that's happening, right? The rise of revenue operations and operations in general, and the rise of data-driven people. And that's why Karishma's point on sales reps being data-driven is 100% true. Like every conversation with the customer, if think about that happens in a SaaS company, needs to be data-driven, right? Because if it's, think about a support team that has no access to product data, right? They will resolve this issue and go on, right? But if you know at the support team that they haven't had usage for the last 3 days, that's a good opportunity to go and have that conversation saying, I noticed that you haven't used it for 2 weeks. What's the problem, right? Like a home example was there was rains in Chennai and we disconnected our Geo fiber. 2 weeks later, I hadn't reconnected it. We have 2 Wi-Fi connections at home. I get a call from Geo fiber. When I recharge, they call me saying, actually, sir, you haven't been, the set-top box itself isn't switched on for the last 2 weeks, right? Now that's a magical support interaction, right? And I'm very passionate about the support side of things because I think for too long, they've been a very transactional team, right? How do you, the rise of PLG and data actually helps them become much more a strategic asset rather than videos not working, Chrome extension is
it has changed from let's keep the house, it's a function to keep the house clean to wow the users, right? And that transition is a very big transition in itself.
And very selfishly, it's a good way to reinvent those careers also, right? Like support
yes, absolutely.
Most important team, but they just like
they don't get the due.
Yeah, extremely burnt out, right? I've built products for them, right? These are opportunities for us to reinvent all these roles to make it much more strategic and more, attached to, hate the word, top line or bottom line. Fact, right?
Yeah. No, I think amazing thoughts, quite nuanced. I think we can keep going. We're at the top of the hour mark. Right? Just a reminder for anybody who's listening, everybody who's listening, if you have questions, please send them our way. We are open for another few minutes and can get Karishma and Susa to answer a few more of your questions. As we wait for some questions, a couple of things that I picked up on and I want to touch upon, right? I think mentioned the word and the term, this thing, community, right? Which is also an emerging trend, and how people are, engaging with users, prospective users, and helping them become successful using the product, and so on and so forth, right? So this intersection of community and PLG, right? High level, what are your thoughts? Somewhere I've also, and this is just tying into the last conversation, it also ties into, it makes support a lot easier, makes support a lot more engaging, right? It is, users supporting each other as opposed to by dedicatedly, separately having a support function within the organization, right? So just some high level thoughts and experiences of how these two things are intersecting, right? PLG and community in this entire ecosystem.
I think community is a super powerful mode to make end users go beyond the product to truly feel like they're connected to the brand that you're trying to build. And I think, in all the chat about product-led growth, we also tend to sort of the importance of brand building tends to be forgotten in many ways, because we've all gotten so data driven and so focused on the data and growth side of things. But I think a big part of a successful PLG company is also building a fantastic brand that users can really identify with. I think Notion, again, is one of those companies that has built a solid brand for themselves. Slack has also done that. They've done it through the product, but their end users also feel very, very passionately about like associating with that product, right? And so I think these companies have really gone beyond the product experience to like build those communities of users and like help build some of that brand love and evangelism that ultimately creates like a circle of like product adoption and product-led growth. Like it creates a full circle, right? So I think like community is a super critical mode that helps like end users truly feel like they're connected to the brand and helps them feel like like the brand is something that's relatable. I'm going to do a shameless plug for a community we were building at ChargeBee called Relay, which is for founders. And ChargeBee's strong philosophy has been on the side of supporting entrepreneurs get set up with billing, right? And so a key part of the freemium plan was to give back to entrepreneurs to say that your first $50,000 of revenue of processing is ultimately free. And so we built this community called Relay, not as a push to sell ChargeBee in any way at all, but really to be able to extend that freemium plan from being just a plan into being providing more support for founders in the form of advice, tips, and tricks. And the idea of Relay is really like it's an AMA platform today, and the team may grow it to become something much bigger in the future. But today, it's an AMA platform where the team brings in one founder who's tried and tested, or who has built a company successfully, and that founder opens up to answer questions that other founders on the community have, right? And it's only founder to founder, so it's super intimate. Some of the answers that I've read on that platform, you won't really find founders sharing that on webinars widely, because it is very related to their personal experience of building a company. It's something that they would only want to share with other founders, right, who can relate to that experience. So the idea of building Relay was just that, is that we go beyond being a monetary, like, sort of free plan or freemium, but to actually supporting the entrepreneur community. And I think that's what community stands for. It's going beyond the pricing plan and things like that to actually give support to your users and make them feel like this brand is interested in solving for wider problems that they have. In the case of Relay, it's that founders building a company is really hard, and you need that platform to be able to talk to other founders. In the case of another product, it might be something else, but identifying what is that overall larger pain point that your persona has and building a community to help them beyond just your product, I think, is where community really tends to have long-term value for your product.
Very valuable. Thanks. I think a couple of things just highlighting what you said. One is a safe space sort of for all users to kind of open up and have a little more, open-ended discussions, and therefore create more value for everybody within a community. And second, maybe the role of it is to, enhance the value of the brand, right? Maybe, hopefully the positive connotation of a cult creation can happen, right? And that just enhances stickiness, and then word of mouth and so on and so forth.
I think it's
Sulsa, you were saying something.
Super important, like Karishma says. See, because people want to be part of something bigger, right? Like with especially the rise of D2C brands, right? People, every simple purchase that you used to make, now people have some kind of identity in, right? Like, hey, I buy this artisanal coffee, or this is a much more environmentally conscious thing, right? So earlier, I used to go to a supermarket, buy what's cheapest thing and come back, right? Now, everything now with D2C, Instagram, everything, your personal life is now seeped with value or brand dependent buying, right? Now, in the US, this has been there for a long time, and it's only going up, right? Like, look at a company like Vidyard, right? If the brand that they have built is that human-powered communication is extremely important in the age of automation, right? Now, it might be just two words saying human-centered or human-powered, but right from website to community to sales, it becomes super important, because for you to go reach out to an empathetic sales rep and saying, hey, people are saying automation is going to take your job away and you don't need so many sales reps. But actually, no, you personalizing each and every message and making some other human on the other side feel great is what this sales is all about, right? And that becomes a movement, etc., right? And we've already seen, like, this is very important, right? And something as a founder I think about and have not done too well, and we are trying to make it better. But like, look at a Drift, right? Extremely crowded market. Chat was always there. There's intercom, and you go look at chat, there'll be 1,000 small logos in like a 16x16 pixel. They came in and said, we are doing conversational marketing, death to forms, and all of those things, right? They built a movement. Product at some point of time, when you have a movement, becomes people are even okay with bugs if you have community and like a movement that you're part of, right? I think it's all about trust and how much you love the brand, right? When you love something, you'll always make do with subpar experiences rather than like if you're just paying value for money products, right?
You will be a lot more forgiving right? Because it's almost like a human connect and attach. I understand you're doing so much. I understand some things will.
And for marketers, non-ROI activities are becoming super important. And I don't want to be a marketer in a company right now, because what happens is that there are so many soft things that you have to solve along with like bringing in leads, bringing in this thing. And it's very hard to take the impact of these things and become like, you have to do a newsletter, you have to do a community, you have to do, academy, video academy, etc. And a lot of these things don't tie back to ROI, right?
So it's very interesting. It's sort of the world has come full cycle, right? Because the whole world was about measuring every action and the ROI on every action, particularly marketing, right? And that is the genesis of Google AdWords and Facebook ads and everything, right? Can every action be attributed to an outcome, right? And from there are now a bunch of things that one needs to do that is purely towards trust building, relationship building, brand building, as opposed to saying, okay, did the sale happen? Did he buy? Did he click? He or she, right? That, just that transition, like you said, when the world gets noisier and more crowded, you have to go to more human touch and, let's say, in the, do things that are less scalable, right? Of course, you have to figure out ways of doing those also better and smartly, right? But I think that's a very important thought.
I think Karishma can probably touch upon how these non-ROI, like building. I'm pretty sure a lot of marketers out there like want to do things like relay at a company, right?
Yeah.
But it's very hard to sell the value of something like that, to say we need to do community, right? People come back and say there is Reddit, there is Hacker News. Why should somebody come and stuff, right? I think probably I'll start with the first.
Patience coming typically from the founders to think really long term and therefore realize the value of something like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think at ChargeBee, we had the luxury of, founders that really believed in long-term value of these kinds of things, and they really pushed for it. And that sort of executive push is really critical in making something like this successful. But I also think that I agree with Susa, definitely. Like it's not an easy thing to build a community overnight, especially a community that's in a platform like Relay, because it's almost like, the Relay team, we often used to think of it as building a product, because you're trying to drive new people into that community. You're trying to sell the value of that community. Why should they come there? You're trying to build content around it. So it was really in many ways like building a new product. In some cases, community built in that sense can be super successful, and I strongly believe in that. But also, I think there are smaller ways in which you can build a community without necessarily committing to like a platform where your community rests. So, for example, just building a solid social media community of people that just love your brand and want to interact with all of that content, even that can be a super powerful way. So with conversational marketing, I think that was a great example of, they didn't necessarily have a place where all of the community went, like Drift. They just built a community around conversational marketing where across social forums, everyone related to that and would talk about that and would identify Drift with that. So I think it can be done even in smaller ways. It doesn't have to be as big as, something like what Relay set out to do. Community can take a shape and form in different ways, I think, depending on the company that you're trying to build. But definitely, like, founders believing in it is really important, I think, for it to see success.
Got it. Couple of questions that have come up in the section, right? If you can read, how to make PLG easier for products where there are company-wide rollouts, need to onboard to multiple level employees, right? Where maybe the market is new, how do you educate initial employees, when there are high effort events before the first aha moments. Any thoughts on this question, right? This is coming from Vishant, who runs product management at an academy, right? Vishant, we're trying to take this one.
Hey Vishant, great question, right? So let me just take it from an example of Graphy, right? And or an LMS system or HR kind of thing, right? I think what is very necessary is finding one person on one department for which you can make the sale very easy to, and then think about the cross-department sale, right? Vidyard, for example, would have been useful for so many verticals, but they would have picked sales and become really good at it, right? And then gone to support or HR or recruiting and the entire gamut, right, Vishant? I think if the way to reduce friction is to reduce variables and constraints, right? To say, hey, let's say I'm going to build an LMS, but the support use cases are going to be super easy to onboard. Connecting Freshdesk is going to take only 1 minute. All the knowledge base articles are going to be imported. And the LMS courses will be centered around, hey, these tickets have not been created, right? So I think being able to go down to one person and one department, one persona becoming insanely valuable for them, and moving on to other things is one way I've seen it work in like large products, right? Like if you go to Lessonly, large LMS, but they break it down by department, and each onboarding path is different by department, right? So I think picking one core department, one core user, and making it awesome, right? I'm pretty sure a company like Notion is also thinking about it today, right? How do I make some HR person who signs up have a ATS template, have it automatically integrated with my ATS solution, right? Because for a lot of these products, it's very overpowering, the power and capability, right? So actually removing most of the things is the problem for companies like Notion, for example. So it's not only companies like that sell big products that have this problem, Vishant. It's also companies that sell powerful products, easy to use also, where the power is so much that people get stuck saying, what is the first thing I want to automate, right?
So find your beachhead and really focus on that and make sure you find success there is sort of the guiding light, if I'm hearing you right.
Yeah, Vishant. Yeah, like for example, Graphy, right? I would say like is a good thing where like how do I get a particular department in a company to create a lot of content, right? Some departments are intrinsically more content creating than others, right? Like marketing is a much more open to creating content. Sales writes every day, right? You're not going to get engineering to write content. It's hard enough for us to get them to update Jira tickets itself. So maybe not the right department to fix, right? So just draw a maturity cycle to say these are the personas and traits of people who usually are here. This is what my product does. Their personality traits and needs map more with them than the rest of the department, and go on from there. Right. Hope that answers.
I think there's one more question. Thanks, Usa. One more question. Karishma, this is from your colleague, ex-colleague at ChargeBee, Venkat. Says, great insights. Thanks. Think PLG is restricted to only freemium products. There can be a bunch of early stage startups that may not be able to go freemium. Can they still look to PLG? Any thoughts on that? All right. Is the freemium thing really tightly coupled to PLG, or is there a way to think differently there?
Got it. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for the question, Venkat. Always nice to see my ex-team at ChargeBee commenting and asking questions. So I think that PLG isn't only restricted to freemium models. I think that, as you rightly say, like freemium may not be suitable for all companies, right? And like Susa earlier mentioned in the talk, PLG doesn't equal freemium. Like PLG is about providing a great product experience that users can self-serve by, but it doesn't necessarily mean giving away your product for free. So you can even have a free trial experience or a gated sort of trial experience where users can at least initially see that value, but then to experience it beyond a certain point in time, they will have to upgrade. But I think that a trial experience or some way in which a user can try and test your product is kind of critical to PLG. So it doesn't have to be freemium where you're offering a full-fledged plan, but it can even be in the form of like a 7-day trial or a 14-day trial where people can actually experience some value with your product. There's also a lot of chat in the growth community about like making the product experience available in your website. So thinking of the website today as a place where you can try and test a few features or a few aspects of the product without necessarily having to sign up for a free account. So almost like an ungated version altogether of your product. So that's actually like some of that's an evolving idea, I think, and it may or may not work for some companies, but that's sort of the direction in which I think a lot of growth folks are thinking. But I think overall, like some way for the user to experience your product value is critical to freemium, but is critical to PLG, but it doesn't have to be freemium.
Got it.
And a lot of companies now try to add on like a small PLG motion, right? Like for example, let's say you're an ML product and you need a lot of data, right? And you're a sales machine learning product, right? Now, instead of going and doing a 3-month implementation process, a good go-to-market strategy for these folks is to make an extension that makes updating Salesforce easier, right? And then throw on the ML pieces, right? So like if you look at most large SaaS products that can go freemium, it's like a HRMS, right? But can they launch a free I don't know, expense management tool, right? Or can they launch a free employee feedback survey product where all the employee information you have, and then it's just easier, right? Your first product might not be amicable to PLG, but there is a product-led funnel that you can build for most companies, right? And a good example I'll tell you is this company called People.ai, right? Massive company, does IBM sales, etc. They recently bought a company and made it free forever to a company that helps update Salesforce and HubSpot, right? Because right now it's a good mode for them. People keep updating the data, and then you can just come in and immediately build in models to make their day easier, right? So you don't have to restrict the universe to what you can currently do in. Is there some parallel small offering that I can build along with the product that obviously aligns with my overall vision, but is a easier first step than like setting up an entire HRMS, for example?
Which is sort of a hook, right, for people to try something, play with it, give you, and then, in this example or a few others, with that hook, the product is getting richer because it is getting data and information and understanding of customer behavior. And from there, you can, hopefully upscale them.
Yeah.
Moz's Keyword Explorer is a great example where you can just type in a keyword and see some search volume and some indicators of how the actual product will be. So, the products, tools like that give you a glimpse into what could potentially happen if you sign up.
That's sort of an OG in this example, if we may call it that, right? Been around forever.
Yeah. See, even it's a new way to look at different markets, right? HubSpot is very smart. They didn't build a full new CRM. They built a Chrome extension that will create contacts for you in whenever you send an email, etc. Right? Slowly learned on the needs and then built the entire full-fledged product out, right? So I would actually say thinking PLG and product-led funnels is also a different way of doing small experiments in your company, right? It's experiments as a mindset in itself, right? And also you need to be open to so many different things and also be open to failure as a company, right? Your first PLG experiment is not going to succeed. It's going to take at least 6 months to 8 months for it to sing, right? So it depends on whether you're bought in or not, or like you said, are you just following a trend or not, right? So I think, again, despite my vested interest in building somewhere, I think PLG definitely is there, right? Because I don't trust websites anymore. It's too jargony in most sense, right? And very hard. So community is a good way for me to go understand what the company is about and trust, right? So I think trust is now also gone to G2, Captera, all of these sites, right? So how easy can you build trust for your product without having them to talk to somebody for trust is the problem that you're trying to solve for, right? In the most non-keywordy, buzzwordy sense. So, like, for example, ChargeBee, right, could make a free tool to just make your invoices look better, right? And that gives powered by ChargeBee, and like then that feeds into your funnel, right? So many different experiments that you have to try that doesn't necessarily fall into your main product bucket. Right?
Amazing, guys. This has been 1 hour 25 minutes, right? We can keep going. I think there's so much to unravel. There's so much to think, and it touches on so many aspects of, I think, running a SaaS business, right? And building a SaaS product today. It's not only just PLG is not a small ecosystem and a small universe, right? I think we've spoken on the gamut of product, marketing, sales, customer support, right? Community, right? It's been very, very enriching, right? We've answered a few questions. What we will end with, if you guys could, share for the audience to who can they follow, people, organizations, content that they can read that you recommend to learn more about this ecosystem, to stay engaged and to ramp themselves up and be more prepared as they build out whatever they're building out. Any recommendations and suggestions, names that come to mind, please share a couple of those, right? That'd be very helpful for the audience.
Yeah, from my end, I'll just probably mention just one, and that's the Reforge community. I think a lot of growth marketers are already probably familiar with this, but I think Reforge has some really great insights. They have a course as well that you can do, but they also have like a community if you sign up for that course where you can ask a lot of critical questions and get a lot of insights around that. I think all of the contributors to Reforge's blog, like there are a lot of folks within growth that contribute to their blog, I think are also great individuals to follow. So definitely check out Reforge.
Super. Reforge is one. Susa, your recommendation?
There's another new upcoming marketing community called Product Led Dot Marketing. Right, it's run by another startup in the PLG space called Inflective, if I'm not wrong. Right, there is one more weekly newsletter that I write, so feel free to subscribe. And there are plenty of other new founders in the space as well. Some that compete with us, but I genuinely believe that everybody makes the market bigger, right? So you should definitely look at some of the people who are building along with us to this future and building towards that. The other thing I have, like anybody from OpenView is amazing, right? Like,
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Great source.
Yeah.
Great source.
follow.
Yeah, I would also shout out the product-led community started by West Bush. So they have some great content as well. But totally agree that OpenView has some really good stuff there.
Content, and I actually also think that this is a fantastic new career for people to jump in, right? Like Karishma would agree that so many things are being figured out yet. You speak to like an Elena Varna at MongoDB, she's like, we're still trying to figure things out, right? Like it's an awesome choice for people just getting into the industry to bet on, right? Like 10 years back, if you had bet on SaaS, right? Like all of us are very privileged, could go to do these things, etc. Now I think people are much more like PLG is a fantastic thing for new people to go look at, right? And also it's an awesome thing for new people because somebody who's done marketing for say 5-10 years, there's a lot of sunk costs and things, how we do things for a lot of ways, right? But PLG may be requiring a new mindset and like etc. So it's
sort of a clean slate, and a big opportunity ahead is the headline view. Everybody, please take note. All right, you know, I'll leave the floor to both of you to kind of maybe a quick bite at the end. You guys are hiring, building teams, and building amazing stuff anyway, right? For the audience, you can find them on LinkedIn and Twitter to follow them. But over to you to have a last note on what you're doing and what you need people's help for.
Yeah, I would just say that I'm available on LinkedIn and Twitter to connect. I'm always happy to chat with folks, in this space. And like Susa said, it's a space where if you're a growth marketer or not, everything is super like defined. There are a lot of ambiguous pieces. So there are lots of things that I may not have figured out myself. So always happy to chat with people. You can find me on both LinkedIn and Twitter. And of course, Vidyard is hiring. So check out our careers page. And if there's something that interests you, we're a remote team. We primarily remote within North America, but if there's a role that interests you, feel free to reach out.
I think we're building Revenue Hero, so for sales teams and PLG companies. So if you can subscribe to our newsletter, like our LinkedIn, and share the posts that we put out, that'd be awesome, right? In terms of hiring, we are looking at one good front-end engineer who knows Next.js and React. So anybody feels that after 1 hour of listening to me that they should continue talking to me. So definitely reach out, right? And anything else in terms of, I've been through the whole startup journey. I met awesome people like Karishma and Arjun on the way, right? And I have a lot of karma to pay back for the last 8-9 years of being in SaaS. So if there's anything that I can help you with or anything you see that I have spoken about in the past that you want to chat to me, reach out to me, and I'd be more than happy to talk to you, anyone who reaches out.
Awesome. No, I think, definitely among two of the most helpful people in the ecosystem, right? And share in terms of sharing their experiences and their learning. So everybody shout out to please reach out to them and take them up on this offer, right? And of course, they're hiring and they're doing some cool stuff, right? Karishma, Susa, cannot thank you enough for today's session, right? And the candid conversations and the depth with which you answered all these questions and how we had this conversation. So much for me to learn. I'm sure for the audience as well, right? I think this definitely calls for a part 2 of this sometime, right? Where we can double click on many things. And of course, we would love to see progress of both your organizations over the next few months and years, right? So we will, do a part 2 of this, right? PLG is definitely the future of SaaS, right? Super excited to have had you and had this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Arjun. It was great being here.
Thanks for having us, Arjun.
Everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining this Monday. Right. Take care, and we'll sign off from Specialetalks. Bye-bye.